Hello, welcome to Advanced Television. This afternoon I'm with Graham Kill, CEO of Irdeto, one of the world's leading content security companies. We're here to talk about pay television and its security in a world of TV everywhere provision. The worldwide pay TV market is expected to reach some $300 billion over the next few years. From your vantage point, what strategies should operators adopt in order to capitalise on this industry growth and obviously increasing demand?
I think, Nick, it really depends. I mean, firstly to the number.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly there are as many forecasters as many numbers exist. But I mean, that order of magnitude is right. Now, pay TV's shown itself to be incredibly durable during recessionary times.
Counter-cyclical, in fact.
Counter-cyclical, and the theory goes, of course, that we retreat to our homes during times of economic hardship. We don't go out to restaurants and things like that. And Tesco's does well on its premium meals because we come home and try to recreate an entertainment experience. And pay TV is incredibly robust as a consequence. Now, all that said, I think that pay TV is really focused on two things: is keeping us within its domain of service offerings as much as possible and for as long as possible, and for us spending as much money with that particular brand as possible. I mean, that's its main mission.
Yeah.
And its challenges are, of course, in this world of internet and broadband proliferation, is that it's getting competing offerings to the consumer much more than it's ever had in its history. If you think right back to the analog days, pay TV was, came out of this very poor provision of channels available to consumers, suddenly offered more channels and channels without advertising. That was, its start. And then we had the digital era in which quality, proliferation of channels, choice, and it just exploded as a consequence. But now there's alternatives. There wasn't really alternatives in those two previous eras unless you just wanted the state fare, the national channels. So I think consumer choice is also in the internet era something that people are much more attuned to taking advantage of, because they can see and access and get recommendations to alternative offerings much more than they ever could before.
So they can shop around.
They can shop around, and shopping around and comparison is a lot easier now. Think of, an e-commerce site. When you go and buy a book, a DVD, a game, a console game or something, you're bombarded with a series of choices in terms of the delivery times, the associated offers that come with it, the price, and it's very similar now for entertainment. Not only that, the internet and broadband, it's broadband really, it's high speeds available to us not only in our homes but as we're walking around everywhere in our lives.
So always on.
The always on, always connected type world means that we also have the opportunity to access content perhaps from illegal sources that we never really could get access easily to before. So all this presents choice to the consumer.
And therefore a threat to traditional, if you like, pay TV operators.
Absolutely. If they don't really embrace this new world and move beyond the sort of linear delivery, I don't mean linear channels, I mean the linear delivery of one-to-many broadcasting, or using, the closed networks that they're used to, really taking advantage of all these devices that are out into the world, the connectivity that we have, and as consumers we want it when we want it, the classic sort of martini entertainment experience, anytime, any place, anywhere. I mean, it's a bit trite to say that, but that's the way that we're living our lives in increasingly connected societies. We do have to remember, of course, that not all societies are connected as much as we might enjoy in, say, somewhere like London. And there are other people going through different phases of this transition elsewhere in the world as we speak. Some are completely leapfrogging it, of course, as the provision of very fast mobile networks are completely overtaking the fixed line infrastructures. So it's a very, very dynamic world. It's fluid. There's a lot of competitive threats for pay TV operators. A lot of them are challenged by the speed at which it all happens. They're challenged by the fact that previously they had a lot of control within their closed networks. They specified the devices. They often owned the devices, rented them out. It was a whole sort of end-to-end, vertically integrated operation. Now, of course, There are networks open to many people through broadband or competing offerings. There's devices that we choose as consumers off the high street or with other internet service providers such as Apple. And we live part of our lives in those ecosystems. Now, you've really got to embrace that to make sure that the consumer, back to my two things that are important for pay TV, that they don't move away from your brand and your service because they can't get what they want with you, and that they start fragmenting their spend on these alternative offerings. So it's really about embracing those new technologies, embracing those new forms of distribution, and bringing consumers along with you as they make their journey of consumption. You're there with them with your brand, your service offerings, and all the wonderful entertainment that you can provide them with.
And are customers of pay TV operators still loyal, or with so much choice brought about by broadband access, is there a lot of cord cutting, and how should pay TV operators react to that?
Yeah, I think that operators are the businesses. So in any population of pay TV operator businesses, you have those that are leading the innovation, those that are prepared to be fast followers, and those that will be laggards. And I think if you were to sort of stereotype the whole population, they've been very much saying, well, I've invested a huge amount in infrastructure already. How long do I allow that to amortize? And what's the right time to invest in new offerings and new forms of distribution? Now, in some territories, the threat is very low because the broadband proliferation is not yet developed, in which case, consumers don't have too much choice of the alternatives, and the pay TV operator says, well, I'll just hone what I've got, and at the appropriate time make that investment. Others that are in much more broadband prolific environments, of course, feel this sense of urgency a lot greater because of the competitive threat, but also because consumers, their loyal customers are demanding this on a day-to-day basis. Why, if I pay for it, can't I enjoy it in the places that I want, on the devices that I want? So I do see that there is a heightened sense of urgency to do that as their competitors become a lot more aggressive, begin to assemble more interesting content offerings, and then giving consumers within their target and within their base a choice. And so in that respect, I do see a lot more urgency. And they need technology, of course, to help them support the business models that they want to offer consumers on those devices.
So there's an arms race both in content, which is one of the consequences of competition, but also in convenience to the consumer.
Yes, and I mean, this is a key to retaining your customer. And if you want to go and get a new customer, that you have to offer this as part of your offering. It's a basic requirement in a highly connected society today. And you only have to look at people on the street and, on tube trains and everything else, the number of people enjoying content on their personal devices. And, if you're paying for that content, you do feel that you should be able to watch it wherever you want.
What kind of roadmaps then can you offer to pay TV operators so they can take advantage of all these different types of provision and monetize it?
Yeah, so this is a real balancing act, because you've got content owners, of course, that wish to protect their assets and make sure that they are licensed appropriately and they get the appropriate return, and they require certain security regimes to be applied to that content as a part of the licensing arrangements. And then, of course, the operators want to make sure that their business model is protected, and what they intend as the economic model is actually a reality when it gets into the marketplace. And they, of course, have to assure the content owner that they're applying the appropriate security regime to get the licensed content. So the challenge is, of course, you've got this proliferation of devices, and they're constantly changing. They've got different flavors of operating system. They've got, economic lives of 18 months. Consumers are changing them. CE manufacturers are bringing in new ones. It's a highly dynamic world. Unlike that sort of vertical controlled network I talked about before, where you could specify a set-top box, you bring it to market, maybe a year later, you've got all the features and functionality in it that you wanted, and a whole series of people work together to bring that to the market. Now it's this free swilling world.
And quite often they have
So-
to bring these services for no extra retail price to the consumer.
So this complexity they need help with, and companies like Irdeto, of course, are there to help them through the choices. And absolutely essential for us is to get the right level of security for the right business model, for the right level of content licensing that can then also be applied to the devices that are most popular in the marketplace, so that the operators have the best reach of their content within their customer base. Now, to your point about the revenue associated with it, I think a lot of operators up until now have been somewhat experimenting with the new forms of delivery, saying, I've got to make a stake in the ground and say, here I am, I'm giving you this choice, consumers. But at the moment, I don't feel that the value that I'm adding, I can justify a new revenue, a fee structure associated with it. So I'm sort of giving it to my premium customers in the same way that I might have given them access to the premium sports channel or to HD before the rest of the customer base. I'm now giving them access to these extended services over the top and to multiple devices. So in that regard, I think they've been playing it cautiously, doing some experimentation, giving it to those that are really the top ARPU customers within their base, and keeping them very loyal and happy. I mean, churn is extremely expensive, and those people are your most precious customers. So look after them, experiment with them, and then extend it out. And now we're beginning to see a lot more operators talk about how they might monetize that as uplifting their ARPU.
Can you give us any examples of where you've worked with broadcasters to help them achieve monetization?
Yeah, so I mean, people like Viaplay up in Sweden are some of the sort of first people that have really been having a separate service with a separate fee structure associated with their over-the-top multi-device offering. Now, in the first instance, that was associated with the pay TV subscription, and now it's also offered as a standalone service. Astro in Malaysia, who we also work with, they started very much with the Olympics and World Cup events, and as a consequence, they gave the opportunity to access this service to a broad base of people. And their proposition was that you could buy up into the pay TV once you've experienced some of this. And that worked very well for them. So there's different combinations, different experiments. A lot of these now have moved into the mainstream of their business operations. As I say, in any population, you've got those that are slower for all good reasons, and those that are, innovating very fast. And those that started some time ago are now moving more into the sort of fee exploration, experimenting with how to package the service, of course underpinned by the technology like we provide, but exploring what's going to work best in terms of the marketplace.
Can you give me any examples of where you've worked with broadcasters on their new strategies?
Yeah, I mean, some of those broadcasters, of course, are constrained by their operating rules by the government. Others, of course, are a lot more flexible. And, a casing example is ITV here in Britain, who is a customer of ours, where we've been the prime integrated designing and building and operating aspects of their pay platform. Now, ITV is a great example. Here is a broadcaster with a wealth of content, fabulous content that has appeal not only domestically, but also internationally. And how do you monetize that? And ITV's got fantastic vision about workflows and a whole integrated business. And Paul Dale, the CTO, has this fantastic plastic map that's a bit like the game that you play on the floor with the spinning disc. And it's got all the workflow on it, and he stands there in his socks and points to the whole flow. But it's really an integrated operation where you take the assets, move them through the system, and distribute them on multiple platforms and monetize in the process, both domestically and internationally. And I think there is an example of a broadcaster with vision, and we've helped them, in implementing that vision, as I say, in the design, build, and operation of aspects of that platform. But they've got, they want to get these assets out of these rather sort of dusty libraries out to in front of consumers, and of course the internet makes that incredibly possible.
So this is content as file management and taking it through a play-out process.
And then attaching business rules to it. You know, what are the appropriate business rules for particular markets, for the particular content. And of course, some of that may well be on a micro basis. I can't speak for their particular revenue plans, but technology, of course, can support virtually any business model that they choose to apply to a particular content in a particular market. And I would imagine that there will be a place for micropayments at an appropriate time for certain content.
You mentioned the changing consumer landscape. Is piracy an increasing concern for operators, given that more content is distributed to more non-controlled connected devices?
It's only proliferating. So, you know, the other thing that broadband has done, of course, is allow us as consumers to not only be exposed to new forms of content distributed in new ways, but it's also allowed us to be a lot more connected to illegal means of accessing content, and very flexibly. It's also allowed a lot of pirates to collaborate real time where previously they were somewhat territory bound. Now this is a completely new dynamic that's increasing the pace of the arms race of piracy and anti-piracy. Now at the same time, you know, there's legislative efforts to set a landscape of what is reasonable behaviour in relation to piracy. And these things are all trying to work themselves out in this very fluid dynamic, and you know, some countries have an initiative and get set back, and you know, it's very fluid. Now, so I think it's on the increase in many respects. And you know, a big part of our work is not only providing the technology that allows an operator to apply their business models through security, but also making sure that the content thereafter remains secure and that they have full visibility of what's going on in the marketplace, both illegally and legally.
So this is intelligence side of the business.
That's right. It's revenue assurance, and it's making sure that you know the revenue that's legally the operators actually comes to them to the full extent that they intended to do, not only through the application of security, but also going and finding, you know, where piracy is happening, what is the form of it, what's the scale of it, not just through, you know, somebody trying to circumnavigate, say, our technology, but also all the other technologies in the marketplace, all the other illegal forms of accessing content through peer-to-peer sites or cyber lockers, because this is an indication of demand. At the end of the day, I mean, you've got those that participate in pirated content and will never ever convert and pay, clearly. But this is an indication of the general demand in the marketplace of, you know, what content is hot, how they want to receive it, when they want to receive it, what ways they're receiving it. I mean, this is wonderful information for any business that's targeting people that are demanding entertainment content.
We tend to think of piracy, certainly in sort of developed pay TV markets, as a thing of the past. I mean, is that true, or what are the challenges still remaining?
We have this concept of a piracy continuum, which sort of, you go from your hardened criminal all the way through to your confused consumer. And a lot of consumers in surveys say, actually, you know, when I look for content, often, of course, through the search engine, and search engines are sort of a part of this puzzle because they're directing people to content. Often they're directing people to pirate sites. Pirate sites look legitimate to a consumer. You know, it's got legitimate advertising.
And credit card transactions.
And credit card transactions. It looks like any other site on the internet. And it can be very confusing for consumers. And this is all part of the puzzle that, you know, we need to work with operators and can bring a lot of services to bear in order to make sure that the revenue that's rightfully theirs remains theirs. But all this is going on at the same time, and it really is powered by the internet. And I would say, you know, as a consequence, piracy is on the rise as opposed to on the wane.
And is that a generational issue too, that the kind of younger consumers, more technically savvy consumers, and consumers who perhaps find themselves facing pay TV bills for the first time if they leave home, look for alternatives?
I do think there are generational aspects. I mean, we all, you know, I liken it in a way, and it's maybe a little offbeat, analogy of how different generations interact with their doctor. So if I think about my grandparents, the doctor's word was sacrosanct, never questioned.
Yeah.
Even my parents, now I'm of that generation where I've got access to other information, so I question. The younger generation look at the institution of the medical profession in a completely different way and look to peer groups and other ways of getting information. So there's transitions in society. And I think in the same way that, you've grown up with a brand, that's your primary destination for your entertainment. You understand the look and feel of it. You feel comfortable with it. I mean, I've lived outside Britain now for 21 years. I grew up with the BBC and ITV when it was a very small sort of national channels environment. And even after all that time away, I still feel very comfortable with the look and feel of the BBC. Now, why is that? It's because our norms and values and everything else is shaped at a certain part in our lives. And so I do think that the generational gap is that they've been consuming content in a completely different way. Yeah. It's fragmented, it's free, it's coming from all sorts of angles, it's coming from peers through social networking sites. And so this is going to shape the generation. And it's going to be a lot more difficult to shoehorn them into the current bouquet, large monthly fee environment of pay TV because they're just simply not used to it. So I'm not a particular believer in this notion that when you get married, have a home, have a family, that automatically somehow something switches in your mind that you're prepared to go and sign up to a pay TV subscription, because I think it's completely counter to the way that you grew up and your norms and values at the time. So you've got to adapt as the business provider to deal with that generation. And I think part of the multi-screen offering, particularly when it's not linked to a large ticket monthly subscription, is one way to start embracing people in your brand and to make sure that they can experience, the great way that content's selected, put together, presented to you as a consumer that the pay TV operator can do. And then you can start saying, oh, do the other things have value to me? And buying up after you've had that experience and entry point. So I do think there's a lot of generational differences.
So it's a cultural challenge as well as a technology challenge.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is basic societal fabric that's changing.
And do you think, obviously the content rights are going to play a big part in that too. That supply side of the industry has almost as much work to do as any technological side of the industry does.
Yeah, and here, of course, the challenge is, at what stage do you cannibalize yourself? I mean, this is something that business and business schools have been wrestling with for years, is, when you see environmental changes happening, do you cannibalize yourself, or do you hang on to your old business models and somebody else cannibalizes for you?
The music industry.
Conventional thinking says you must cannibalize yourself, otherwise somebody's going to do the job for you. Yeah. So in that respect, I think it's all about timing, and all the studios know this. This is about at what point in time do you shift over, the extent to letting something out, because you do have a business to run with existing revenue streams that you do need to protect, and the point is how to make that transition. Everybody's grappling with that. I think there's some good experiments going on in which the single day release, this type of thing is important to gauge exactly what I think everybody really knows. But of course, when you're in an executive environment in a studio, you need to go to somebody with some hard data and say, look, this made this much of difference. What
strategy should operators take to cement their business model in this new connected and broadband enabled market?
We're there to provide them with the tools through technology to allow them to have the business models that they desire as they go on this journey, particularly to this sort of all IP, broadband connected world. I think very much supplemented by broadcasting, because of course that has so many economic benefits in terms of delivery of certain bandwidth content. But at the end of the day, that's the journey that they're on. and we're there with our technology and our services to take them on that journey so that their business models that they intend can be launched, preserved, and changed as the market changes and they want them to change. And that's really our job.
So it's evolution, but it's got to be really quite quick.
Yeah, I think that the pace of business has completely changed. I mean, whether you're a bricks and mortar retailer on the high street or a pay TV operator, you're experiencing the same thing. There's just the barriers to entry for new competition are a lot less. The speed of getting something to market through the internet is that much less. It's a lot more about let's throw something at the wall, see whether it sticks, and you know what? Doesn't work, pull it back, try something else. Whereas the broadcast world has been very much about, the precision, the quality, the uptime of the experience, the quality of the what appears on the screen, and that takes time to make sure all those things can be assured, and as a consequence, the cycle times can be quite long. And this other world's coming completely across it. And that's challenging culturally in organisations. Whether you're a technology provider, whether you're the platform operator, it's a big challenge to any established business. And those that are clearly going to adapt are the people that can embrace that. And we see very much our role as making sure that we've got the things available in anticipation of the changes that our primary customers, the pay media operators, are going to have to make at the right time so that they can deploy them and take advantage of those things and make it easy for them, because it is complicated, it is fast moving, and if we've done a lot of that heavy lifting, which we believe that we have through our products, services and solutions, then the next step of trying it as an operator is a lot easier. You don't have to get back into this world of let's try to do everything ourselves and pull everything together, and it's a long cycle time. We've got solutions together, they're proven in the marketplace, they're working for people out there. This is the time to embrace, try, and see how it goes, and morph as the market changes.